Hello beautiful friends, I have a project to share with you today that is very close to my heart. It is a photo of my dear grandma who passed away in 2019. I have just shown you here the cut file that is already backed, and I'm going to include a link here now to my tutorial video where I walked you through how to back an intricate, or how to cut the backing pieces for an intricate cut file like this using your Silhouette Studio software and your Silhouette Cameo. So definitely go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. I have also prepared my background by adding some stitching to just the two sides, not the top and the bottom, on my machine. And I have also splattered a few different colors of just a, excuse me, a mixed media watercolor on the background around where my cut file is going to go, and that was just to help the white of the cut file stand out a little bit more against the white background. So I had a pretty clear idea in mind of how I wanted the design of this layout to go, so it did come together quite quickly. And I wanted to border the top and the bottom of the page using these branding strips. So this is a Hip Kit Club kit that I am using for this layout. I believe this is the January kit. I picked up a couple of months worth of these kits at the start of the year, so you'll probably see me using some of their products in upcoming videos. But these strips that I'm using here, I'm pretty sure were branding strips. I'm fairly certain that they were branding strips, and they were just such pretty patterns. And I really loved using purple on this layout. It's not something that I use a lot in my scrapbooking layouts, but my grandma was wearing a beautiful purple dress, and so I thought that the purple that features in this kit was a perfect products to use to scrapbook this photo. So yeah, I've just created those little border strips down the bottom. As you saw, I trimmed that pink paper in half, so I had two 6-inch strips, and I've just layered that up with the two 12-inch purple strips. So now I'm going to create a little mat for my photo, and I'm making sure that I get as much as I possibly can out of the papers in this kit. So what you can see on screen now is that the pieces that were left over after I'd cut out the backings for my cut file, I am using those to create mats for my photo as well. I've also pulled out some cards from the Project Life kit, which is also from Hip Kit. And I have added some machine stitching around these paper layers on my sewing machine with just a plain white cotton thread, just for a little bit of extra texture and visual interest on those photo mats. It's something that I have been doing a little bit more recently. It's just something different to my usual distressed edges, and I really like the effect. So to add a little layer of softness behind these photo mats, I have a small white paper doily, and again, making the most use out of my supplies, I trimmed that in half, and I've just added half to each side of the photo. Now I wanted to make sure that I had my placement correct before I went ahead and stuck my cut file down. I have added some foam adhesive behind my cut file, and I've done that off camera, and I'm pretty sure I do take all the backing off camera as well. But I'm going to stick the photo down first because the cut file is going to slightly overlap the photo. So I'm just going to bring that cut file in and use it as a guide, and bring in my T-square ruler now to make sure that I've got my photo nice and straight. Got the placement correct, so now using my T-square ruler I can go ahead and pop that down, and I'm just making sure that it's also centered to the middle of the page, as well as making sure that it's straight. So there is all those foam pieces on the back. I'm going to start tearing them off and then switch the camera off and finish that off camera, because it is quite tedious. And I had the thought before I stuck that cut file down that I wanted to make those little border strips a little bit more interesting. So I've added a row of stitching to each of the strips, and I have also really roughed up the edges just to give it a little bit more texture. I think when I adhered the strips to the page, those purple strips were about a 1/2 inch, but I had layered them so that they were hanging off the edge of the page by 1/4 inch. So once I trimmed that down, I ended up with a border strip that was 1/4 inch rather than 1/2 inch. And that just gives me a little bit more room on my layout to fit in the journaling here. And the journaling for this photo was taken on Easter Sunday in 2018. So it wasn't the last Easter that we got to spend with Grandma, but it was the second last. And I can't recall right now whether or not she was with us on Easter Sunday, as in physically present in our house or in my parents' house on Easter Sunday in 2019. But I got this really sweet photo of her just sitting as all the kids were running around, and I knew that I wanted to document just how special it was and how much I cherish all of the times that we got to spend with her while she was still with us. When she passed away, she was less than a year off turning 100, so she definitely had a very long and a very full life, and we miss her. So now we've come to the fun part, the embellishing. I pulled out just a few different embellishments that came in the kit. Excuse me. That little, I'm not quite sure what it's called, the mannequin, the sewing mannequin. It's not something that I would ordinarily use on a layout. I don't really do much sewing. My mum is a fantastic seamstress, sewer, but it's not something that she passed on down to me. But I know that if I don't use something like these kinds of embellishments, I know that if I don't use them up straight away, they're going to be something that's just going to sit around in my stash for a really long time. So my thinking in including it here with this layout is sewing is something of an older skill. I know it's becoming more popular again, but I think in my mind, it's a skill that I associate with the older generations. And so I thought it tied in well enough with this particular layout, obviously Grandma being a much older generation, a couple of generations older than me. So that's why I used it, and I'm really happy that I was able to make use of an embellishment that would otherwise probably honestly go to waste in my stash. I've also grabbed a couple of these really interesting different floral die cuts that were in the kit. I love the patchwork look of them, and so I've just cut those in half so that I can again maximize my supplies, tucking one on each side of the photo. Now these little white bows I have had in my stash for many years. It's called a Bow Easy bow maker. It's quite strange looking, and I think if you were to look at it, you would have no idea what it would be used for, aside from the fact that it says bow maker on it. And I don't have any instructions for it, so every time I get it out, I have to re-Google the instructions and look at another YouTube video to remind me how to use it. But what I love about it, I find bows really hard and fiddly to make. And this little bow making tool makes it so easy to make the most perfect looking bows every time. And the extra bonus is that you can make really teeny tiny ones, which is what I've done here. So I grabbed some really thin white ribbon, and I made up, I think, 3 of these really beautiful fine white bows. And I don't know how many I get onto this layout, but what's left over just gets tucked away with the rest of this hip kit, because I'm sure that I will find a way to use them again on another project. And while I've been chatting away about bows, I've been continuing on with my embellishing. So these really pretty puffy buttons stickers, I knew that I wanted to bring in a couple of those, but I didn't like that they were see-through, so I've just stuck one of them down onto a piece of plain white cardstock and trimmed that out, and that's that little purple button that you can see on the left of the photo. And I am, of course, as I usually do, using some foam adhesive behind the outside edges of my embellishments, just to help give them some dimension and lift them up off the page. So I wanted to use this bow here again, but I was having trouble sticking it, and the reason for that is that it was the photo, it different levels, so I needed to just hold it down for a little bit longer with a little bit more adhesive to give it time to really stick down, and so that's what I'm doing now. And then that is stuck down nicely. I also bring in a couple of, I have this little bowl to the left of where I'm working. When I've been cutting files out on some white cardstock and I've got extra space in, I try and fill up the space with some little pieces that I think I might use that are pretty generic. So I have these foliage leaves. They're really simple little foliage leaves, and I've got a bunch of them cut out along with some florals, and they're just sitting in a little bowl. So just to finish off this layout, I thought I would bring a few of these in. I'm just trimming off the stems because I don't need them to be quite that long. And I love the little finishing touch that this gives because I've got the floral die cuts in there. Adding this little bit of foliage just really helps to finish that off. And I really, really love the effect. I think it's a really pretty way to add just a little bit of extra detail to these embellishment clusters. And just using wet adhesive on the inside so that the outside of each of these is loose, and as you can already see, they kind of stand up against the page naturally on their own. So it again adds a little bit more visual interest by adding some dimension and giving those foliage pieces just a little bit of movement. So to finish off, I am using these tiny puffy heart stickers, which also came in the kit, and I'm adding just a little bit of wet adhesive behind each of them just to make sure that they stick down and that they're not going to fall off as the layout sits in an album over time. But that will be it for this layout. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new to my channel, I would love for you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can join me for all of my upcoming videos. If you've been around for a while, thank you as always for all of your support. And I will leave it there. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.